Good afternoon, grade 7. Today, I am going to discuss about the food chain. This is teacher Mildred, and this is biology, grade 7. The boy in the photo is eating rice for lunch. It gave him lots of energy. The food that we eat gives us energy. But how did the energy get into the food? The energy in our food began in the sun. Energy from the sun reaches the earth in sunlight. Plants use energy from sunlight to make food. Some of the energy from the sunlight goes into the food that the plant stores inside its roots, stems, and leaves. When an animal eats the plant, it eats the plant's food. This is how the animal gets energy. We can show how the energy passed from the sun into the rice and then into the boy's body by drawing a food chain. A food chain shows how energy passes from one organism to another when it makes or eats food. It will start from the sun. The rice will absorb the energy coming from the sun, and the boy would eat the rice. The energy was transferred from the rice to the boy. The arrows in the food chain show the energy passing from one thing to another. Producers and consumers are two important parts of a food chain. The first organism in a food chain is always a plant. Plants use energy from sunlight to produce food. They are called producers. Animals cannot make food using sunlight. They have to eat ready-made food. They consume or eat plants or other animals. They are called consumers. Let's have an example of a food chain. Let us start with the grass. The grass is the producer. The grass is eaten by the cricket. The cricket is eaten by the spider. The spider is eaten by the small bird. And the small bird is eaten by the hawk. On the screen are examples of food chain. For the first photo, the producer is the grass. The grass absorbs energy from the sun. The grass is eaten by the grasshopper, the primary consumer. The grasshopper is eaten by the frog, the secondary consumer. The frog is eaten by the snake, the tertiary consumer. And the snake is eaten by a hawk, the final consumer. When the hawk dies, it would be eaten by the decomposer, in this case, the fungi. The second photo shows a food web. A food web is when there are two or more food chains present in an ecosystem. The producer is the green plant. The green plant is eaten by the rabbit, the primary consumer. The rabbit is eaten by the wild cat, the secondary consumer. And the wild cat is eaten by the lion, the tertiary consumer. Another food chain could be the green plant is eaten by the goat, the primary consumer. The goat is eaten by the jackal, the secondary consumer. And the jackal is eaten by the lion, the tertiary consumer. What is the relationship between humans and food chains? Long ago, humans found all their food in the wild. They hunted and killed animals. They gathered and ate berries, seeds, leaves, and roots from plants that grew where they lived. The hunters had to work hard to find and kill prey. They did not kill very many animals. They were careful not to gather too many plants. They always left some to grow so that there would still be food for them in the future. The farmers. Today, most of the food that we eat comes from farms and gardens. Farmers need land to grow their crops and keep animals. When farming began, trees and plants that grew naturally were cut down and killed. Farmers planted crops on the cleared land. How farming affects the food chain. When land is cleared to grow crops or to keep animals, most of the plants and animals that used to live there can no longer survive. Their habitat and their food supply is destroyed. The trees and plants at the beginnings of food chains are killed. Most of the animals further along the food chains have nothing to eat. They die or they move to other places where they can find food. But some animals can eat the crops that the farmer grows. They may have even more food to eat than before the land was cleared. Human activities and food chain. Any human activity that affects the living organisms around us also affect the food chains. Here are two examples. First, fishing. When we take fish from the sea, we are taking away food that another animal could eat. If we take too many fish, then there may not be enough food for these animals and they may die out. Second, introducing new species. For example, the possums that were introduced from Australia into New Zealand to be bred for their fur. Many escaped and now there are 30 million of them. Possums eat young growth on trees. The trees in New Zealand do not have adaptations to protect them from possums. The possums eat so much that there is not enough food for the native animals and birds. They also eat the eggs and young of the native birds. And that's the end of the lesson about the food chain. Remember, a food chain shows how energy passes from one organism to another when it makes or eats food. Food chains begin with plants which use energy from sunlight to make food. Plants are producers because they produce food, and animals are consumers because they consume food that was originally made by plants. Humans clear land to grow crops. This destroys habitats and harms the food chain. Some wild animals can live in the crops that farmers grow. Fishing and the introduction of new species can harm food chains.